the CEO of ACHR Aviation, Adam Goldstein, who is joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
These are electric helicopters.
It is a long time coming. People have been talking about flying cars. When are we going to see our flying cars? And it's basically here. So the technology's been worked on for a long time. It started back in 2009, and over the last 16 years, it's progressed to a point where the tech is ready. It's economically viable, meaning you can move enough stuff, people, far enough, fast enough, and the safety standards are very high. And then the regulators came in and wrote all the rules to allow us to do this. And so the goal is to launch by the end of this year.
So battery-operated helicopters. Let's talk safety, right?
Sure. So one of the great applications of this technology is that you can take the single point of failure out of vertical lift vehicles. So a helicopter might have 200 or 300 single fault parts because you have a limited ability to add redundancy. But with this new concept, you have the ability to add a lot of redundancy. So if you just look at the aircraft, you can see multiple electric engines, multiple sets of propellers, multiple fuel sources, so in our case, batteries. That's something you can't do necessarily in a helicopter. So you have a very high standard of safety. Also, the EV market has progressed for so long, so much dollars have gone into that, a lot of that thanks to Tesla. We're at this stage now where batteries are very safe. We've seen millions and millions and millions of cycles that have gone through. We use a commercial off-the-shelf cell, so it's all very well tested at this point.
And so why do we need these? And these are small helicopters. We're not talking that could carry 10 people. These are carrying how many people?
A pilot plus 4 passengers.
A pilot plus 4 passengers. And how would this change? These are short-haul trips. Obviously, you can't go very far because you do have battery length and battery life involved. So what would we be using these for?
Well, people use helicopters today because they're extremely convenient. And so you really don't want to be in a helicopter that long. Nobody wants to take a 3-hour, 5-hour helicopter trip. If you're going that far, you might as well just take a larger commercial aircraft. They go faster, they're more comfortable. You can stand up and go to the bathroom and get a drink, all the stuff that you might want to do. But the short distances, call it less than 100 miles, the use cases become very interesting when you think about areas that you already drive today that are relatively short distances that take you a long time. So city center to airport. So think like Heathrow into the city in London. That's a trip that can take you hours, but that's a trip that you could fly in minutes. And so the airlines look at this as a really interesting opportunity to go deploy because airport to city center all of a sudden becomes not a big deal, and you can do that in minutes rather than hours, and that's great for their business model.
But what about air traffic control? I mean, you have these things flying around with personal helicopters.
Yeah, the air traffic control exists today because helicopters exist today. And so we'll start using existing infrastructure. So there are helipads today. You can land helicopters at airports today. The air traffic control deals with this stuff on an everyday basis. Now, of course, that needs to expand in order for our market to expand. So there's a lot of work that's been done. All the different countries around the world have been working towards this. NASA has been working towards this. How do we build the air traffic management system of the future? And so there's a lot of people that are interested in that. It goes beyond just making room for new vehicles. There's lots of other reasons to do that. Sustainability is one of them. Lowering all the carbon usage is another example.
And it's noise reduction as well, right?
Yes, so these vehicles have much lower acoustic signatures than helicopters. That's probably the single biggest benefit that you see out of these aircraft. So anybody that's been around on the ground when helicopters fly over are very familiar with that wop wop sound. Mm-hmm. These aircraft don't have that. The propellers spin at much slower speeds and create a totally different frequency, more of a whooshing sound. And so it's not as annoying to humans. And when they fly at typical 500 to 1,500 feet above ground, you really won't hear them at all.
And so what are the opportunities here for partnership when you talk about airlines who you say going from Heathrow to London or going from JFK out to the Hamptons, whatever. What are the opportunities business-wise for you in the aviation space?
So there are lots of different categories that we look at to partner with or sell into. So airlines is a great example because the airport to city center use case is so easy to understand. Everybody leaves early for the airport because traffic is variable. You don't know how long it's going to take you. And if it's, you want to arrive to the airport early so you don't feel stressed. But if I could cut that out and I could fly you directly to the airport, guarantee you that you would get there. And if I could land gate side and you just walk upstairs, now it's an experience almost similar to flying private. So you can really elevate that experience. But there's lots of other use cases. So take a hospital, for example. most hospitals have helicopters, big hospitals especially. And the reason they use them is they're mostly just flying doctors and nurses around. Sometimes they're doing different rescue things, but a lot of times they're really just moving people. And so the pitch to a hospital is, hey, here's a thing that is much quieter for the neighborhoods you fly in, it's safer, and it's lower cost. And that's a pretty easy pitch to win.
So how quickly are you able to scale? I mean, you have how many of these now?
Well,
And I wish do we have the picture anywhere? I guess we don't. We were going to put a picture of it up here, but go ahead. Have you scaled? Oh, it's over there. Okay. Yay. It's just me who can't see it. Okay, so how many of these do you have already?
So we just opened up our big factory in the US. It's right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. So that factory can produce up to 650 aircraft per year. So that's been built, the CapEx is in the ground, that's all ready to go. The stage that we're at now has to do with getting all the regulatory approvals to launch. So the goal is to launch this year. We will start in Abu Dhabi. There's a great network of companies and people and government that have all come together to make this happen. And so the goal there is to start putting that out. So if you think about the 25, 26 time period, you're going to be seeing, something less than 100 aircraft. We're not talking tens of thousands coming at day one. It takes time to build and scale up the operations. We also want to do it safely. And so you'll start to see that come. And as you get into the later half of the decade, you'll really start to see that scale
And
up.
air traffic will have to scale up because while you say that they already monitor helicopters in the area, you only have at any given point, I don't know, a dozen helicopters over a major city, but you could have, 50 of these over the city flying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it from a business model perspective, there are thousands of airlines globally. And just the airlines as one use case. I mean, there's a defense application, there's a rescue application, there's all different types of applications. But if we just stick with airlines, let's say airlines wanted to just try this out. And they said, okay, give us 5. Let's just test this out. And let's say 20% of the airline industry wanted to do this. Why would they want to do this? Because it can enable them selling more business class, first class seats, which is how they make money. So all of a sudden, just one category, 20% trial of that will equal thousands of these vehicles out there spread globally. So while you might not see them in lines, across the sky in your city, they will be out there in the thousands. So the businesses can get really big really quickly because these are $5 million products. And if you're selling thousands of them, you can really start to generate a huge business. Then some of those airlines will convert to fleets, and you'll really start to see this pick up into the 2030s.
So what do you think a seat on this helicopter is going to cost me?
From the consumer perspective, it'll be somewhere that's comparable to like a high-end ride share. So think like an Uber Black type service. So where you might pay something like $100, $150 to go to an airport in one of those type of scenarios, maybe you'll pay $200. It'll be something that might be
I would have thought it'd be more expensive.
Yeah, the goal is scale. That is the goal of this whole project. And so we do want to try to make it affordable to a broader group. It still will start at a higher price than, of course, taking your own car as an example.
And because the cost to run this vehicle is much less because you're not using gas, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that drive down cost, but I think the biggest opportunity from a cost side is on the maintenance side. These are electric vehicles, they're simple. Our electric engines only have 6 moving parts, so they're much more simple vehicles that will take much less maintenance. That is really I think the biggest driver that can help bring the cost of this down. But the other side is you can scale them too, because if you have a lower acoustic footprint, you can put more of them in the cities. If you can scale this, you can have mass production and drive the cost way down.
And what is the defense opportunity?
The defense opportunity is actually very topical right now, as it's clear there's a whole new category of unmanned systems that are going to get built. And that's across fixed wing, rotorcraft, big, small, all types of applications. But there's not that many groups out there that can build autonomous, they call it like future vertical lift type programs at speed. And so the startup community, sort of more earlier stage companies, have actually started to take a bigger role in this. So ACHR recently partnered with a company called Anduril out of Southern California, and to go build some of these new future vertical lift platforms. So there's an incredible opportunity coming. More on that in the months ahead.
And do you have any competition in this space?
The space used to be extremely competitive. And so the industry started, 15, 16 years ago, and there were thousands of companies out there. But the reality is building airplanes is very expensive. And so while a lot of the companies that didn't succeed had great concepts with great engineers, the capital side of things simply became too challenging. And that's where the US had a huge advantage. The capital markets in the US are unrivaled. And the access to capital for companies, it's almost unfair to the competitors. And so
Is it VC funding mostly, or?
it's all across the
All
board.
across the
VC money. I mean, ACHR went public is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. I mean, we've raised over $2 billion of capital at this point. And I know there's plenty of great companies in Europe, as an example, that have really struggled to even raise hundreds of millions of dollars of capital. And so the liquidity of the capital markets has been a big decider in which of these companies can survive. And of course, there's lots of great concepts.
And you told me backstage there that you had been talking to Elon Musk. Tell us about those discussions.
Well, the administration has been very supportive to industries that are struggling with lots of regulation. And so, especially when there's a global competition. And so the transition team specifically reached out and wanted to work, with the industry to help figure out what some of those problems are so they can start working on that. I mean, Elon Musk has probably done more for this industry, having never built a plane, but just enabling battery technology.
Right?
Someday we hope he will. But he's enabled battery technology to where it is that's allowed all this to happen. So I know he's a big advocate of new technologies, and he thinks all things will go electric outside of rockets. That's his kind of famous line, including airplanes, and he adds that into his earnings calls now, that he said even airplanes. And so I think it's coming, and I think he'll be a big supporter of the space.
And do you expect to get government funding at any point?
There's lots of ways that the government has been very helpful, but we haven't necessarily taken like traditional government funding. I think in the US that's harder to do. There's other ways that the government helps. So NASA's a big partner, for example. We do a lot of things on the safety side, studying battery cells. Obviously, batteries in space can't catch on fire, so they have a lot of data and a lot of experience. They do a lot of work on the acoustic side and then on the defense side too. So the US Air Force and Army have more experience in vertical lift than anyone else in the world. And so tons of experience in data that they can help with.
I'm fascinated by this because years ago I used to fly around in news helicopters. That's a scary place. Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Adam
much. I
Goldstein,
appreciate it.
Archer
Thank you.
Aviation.